Hello again, and welcome to this panel regarding sort of disability and creativity. With me today, and I'm going to try and do it again on my on my left on the screen. Um, I've got Harry Connor and Sarah Millman, both of them fantastic creatives of comics and all sorts of other stuff. But I'm going to actually get them to introduce themselves. So, Harry, if you could introduce yourself and some of your work that you've done.
Oh, and my work. Hello. I'm Harry. I use they pronouns. I'm an author and illustrator, mostly of comics, also of like choose your own books. That's it. That was my whole intro.
Because I found out about you, Harry, through the Adventure Zone board game that they
Oh
made.
wow. Yeah.
That's how I found out about your work, and I've been following you ever since. Um,
That's so cool. I think I'm not very good at doing that. So I do often get people being like, "Oh my god, that was you," about like quite a different thing. But
yeah,
the main things I do is like comics or like sort of TTRPG stuff.
yeah, because you've got a book out at the moment, haven't you?
Yeah, I had my first graphic novel out with a big publisher. God, hold on, I'm gonna hold it up extremely
Yeah.
professionally. This is the UK version. Ooh, it's a book you can buy
Ooh.
in shops and everything. It took a long time because it's a comic. So it's very strange to talk about because it just came out in like last October, so a couple of months ago. But I finished drawing it in like 2023. Like I
Wow.
started drawing it like 5 years ago.
Wow.
It's a trans Regency romance. It's
Nice.
like very Jane Austen type plot, but thinking a bit more about like the real people that lived in that era, thinking about sort of marginalized history and stuff. I've snuck in a little history section at the back because I'm a nerd about that stuff.
Would you be able to put the cover up again? Squid said that they weren't able to
Yes.
see it. There we
Okay.
go. What's it called again? It's called I
It's
Should Never
called I
Fall In.
Should Never Fall in Love, which is very difficult to Google or write out in posts, I found out.
Fantastic. Thank you, Harry. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sarah, she, they. I go by Milmo as well in a lot of places. I self-publish comics. I also do talks and workshops with teenagers and adults and kids. Yeah, I've kind of like starting to pivot more into writing at the moment, but yeah, I don't have anything near me that I've done. So
Sorry.
prepared. But I'm probably most well known for like MPCT, which I kickstarted, and the volume came out 2021, which is really scary that it's now 2025. Um, but yeah, that's me pretty much. But
Cool. Well, I mean, I've got a copy of MPCT, and I absolutely love it. It's so good.
thank
And
you.
obviously, you've been a constant appearance at PrideCAF as well, and we'll always be happy to have you there because everyone seems to love you.
Oh, thank you.
So let's get on chatting with the main topic, which is obviously sort of being a creative and disability at the same time. So, if both of you are happy to, I'd really like to sort of talk about your history with your disability and sort of how it affects you on a day to day basis. Um, Either one of you who's happy enough to go first, or I can pick.
I don't mind going first. I basically I have long COVID, so um it kind of obviously manifested when I got COVID in I think 2020 and then 2021 I got my diagnosis, and since then I've like got COVID two or three times.
Oh no.
So it's kind of just snowballed a little bit. The best way I can describe it is similar to chronic fatigue, but there's less known about it, and it varies quite dramatically between people. So they're still learning about it. The way it kind of manifests with me is I'm up and down. Some days I'm really good and I can do things, but then I will crash quite a lot afterwards. I basically feel like I'm at a constant level of some kind of cold, whether that's really bad or just kind of mild, feeling a bit rough. Um, yeah, that's, and I've kind of been coming to terms with it over the past couple of years, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later. But that's basically me. I've also got like depression and anxiety. I don't mind talking about that too, and I've had that.
Mm.
I've been taking medication and have been diagnosed with that like since my 20s. So everything just kind of compounds, doesn't it? I'm held together by string. But yeah, that's me.
I think my understanding is that the symptoms for long COVID, and so I would say I had ME or chronic fatigue syndrome. A lot of people don't use CFS because chronic fatigue is like a symptom, really. So you can, if you're going through like chemotherapy, chronic fatigue is a thing that you can get, and it's also not the main, like, it's actually not the main symptom for the illness that I have, where the main thing is like payback. So if I talking to you today means I'll be really tired tomorrow, kind of thing. But I think my understanding is that long COVID and chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, I'm just going to call it ME for the rest of the panel, I think, but like that their symptoms overlap completely. But there's certainly things that from COVID you might have like specific, like people I know who've had like already had asthma or lung problems might have had that exacerbated more because obviously it's a respiratory thing. But I think they're under the sort of same big umbrella of like post-viral illnesses. So for me, that basically also meant I got sick with a viral illness in 2016 and I just didn't get better. I spent the first couple of years being kind of up and down, or like thinking that I was better, or just thinking I constantly had a cold like all the time. And I just didn't get a diagnosis for ages. I actually ended up paying £200 to see like a neurologist who could like give me a piece of paper who was like, this is what's up. So I think and that was when it was, I've basically been bedbound since 2018. I say bedbound is just the easiest way of explaining it. I'm basically lying down all the time. This is a chair that I've got a little remote control, little chair that like goes up and down. So I am sort of lying down. You're getting a very flattering low angle of me if I'm lying down properly. I feel like it would be useful to talk about the ways that it affects me, because I think even
please do, yeah.
maybe people like listening with different sorts of illnesses or like friends who have them, the symptoms might overlap even if they're different things. So apart from like feeling like I've got the flu all the time and like literally like can't stand up for very long, like muscles like weak, that kind of thing, there's also like a lot of brain fog stuff, like not being able to find the right word, and also lots of like little weird bits and bobs, like what's it called, the temperature thing in my body is like doesn't really work, so I don't know if I'm too hot or too cold. Getting in the shower is like my body can't understand how to keep the temperature right, so I have to like recover after a shower for ages, and I get like weird towards, it's actually been a couple of years since this happened, but I used to get lots of like, when wires cross in your brain, so I would smell something wrong, like it would be food, like I remember it really remember eating like sweet corn and it smelled like nail polish remover. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people with COVID or had like during COVID or like have in the aftermath of it. So lots of like brain stuff that's gone a bit like wrong. There's probably like a huge like the big laundry list of like smaller symptoms I can get, but the main thing is it feels like I've been hit by a truck if I stand up or talk or think too hard. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no,
is that
that's
similar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely similar to some of the symptoms that I get if I am feeling particularly run down, or if I'm getting or if I'm particularly pushing myself. So definitely like those cold and flu symptoms, like back in probably 2019, that was probably when I was at my worst. And it was just that constant feeling of just like feeling like you had the flu, which sucked. And I don't think it helped that I had undiagnosed sleep apnea at the time as well. which has now been sorted, thank goodness. Um,
Mm.
but I then also wasn't getting the rest. So my one was I do believe that I got ME through sort of like a viral infection as well back in 2018, and I got diagnosed in 2019 because I think I quite quickly realised that something wasn't right. I was finding it a struggle because I used to walk to work, and I was finding that a struggle to do, getting ill quite frequently, and yeah, and it's taking me a while just to sort of get those energy levels right. And like I'm still awful with it. I still push myself like when I really
Mm.
shouldn't, and when my body's telling me no, you shouldn't be doing this. But I do feel like I'm a little bit better than what I used to be. Um, but speaking of which, would both of you be happy enough to talk about like what you do for yourselves to sort of like manage your energy levels and manage any sort of chronic pain that you might get, any sort of fatigue when you feel that encroaching on you, when you kind of feel those signs of just like I'm gonna crash. So like earlier you said, Harry, you said like you know that you're going to be talking to someone today, it might wipe you out for tomorrow, or you know it's going to wipe you out for tomorrow. So what do the both of you do to sort of manage your lives, um, to then make sure that you can still be creative and do sort of and do your work? Um, Harry, if you want to start first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it took me quite a long time. And I think it also just took me a long time to admit how much I couldn't do. So there was a long period where I'd be like, I can still make myself lunch. It would be crazy for me to ask someone else to make lunch because I could physically do it. And then I would like make a sandwich and be like too tired to eat it. I'd be like lying on the floor. I couldn't eat the sandwich. So I mean, like not every day, but like I think there was so much stuff where I was like, I don't think I'm ill enough for this. I think also
Mm.
I think doctors now almost have heard of long COVID more, but like my GPs did not know. A lot of them were just like, you should just push yourself, which is like literally the opposite advice. It's the thing that you don't want to do
Yeah.
for ME. So I also like spent the first few years like just didn't really know what to do. And it took me, I think, longer than it should have to get a wheelchair because, again, I was like, I'm sure the NHS would give me a wheelchair if I needed one. That's what's going to happen. And so I was just like, well, I could stand up. It would just have a lot of payback, so I don't need it. And it just meant I wasn't leaving the house because I couldn't. I tried to walk to the post office and I'd just be like collapsed. So it meant I was doing less because I think I didn't like they're just tools. There were so many tools that could have helped me that I was like, well, but do I deserve these? No one's told me
Mm.
I'm disabled, which I think is something I've heard from a lot of other people with like more severe post-viral stuff as well. So on a literal stuff that I have in my house now, eventually, I like sit down in the shower. Pointless for me to be using energy stood up in the shower. I sitting up is not really something I need to do. I can, if I can be as flat as possible, is helpful. So before I had this, it was like a wedge pillow in bed or whatever it was. I've got noise cancelling headphones because little noises really get to me. Um, buying fruit that's cut up, buying vegetables that are cut up already because I can't really hold a knife. And it was another thing where I was like, I could,
Mm.
but it would take a lot of energy. I honestly think basically every aspect of my life I have like adapted. I like draw, and from a creative standpoint, I always draw in an iPad now. I used to have a sort of dual screen set up, and it was just like too much really. Whereas I can just lie down with an iPad and it's much easier. I letter everything in Clip Studio because I can do it with my left hand, and you can draw the bubbles instead of hand lettering them. So like
Oh,
basically every single like little shortcut that I could possibly be doing. Again, I was quite stubborn and it took me a while, but I'm now like every shortcut, both in life and creatively. And obviously, like the biggest thing is giving myself more time to do stuff. Like if I'm not actually well enough, I was supposed to do 4 thumbnails today or whatever. I'm not well enough for that. Really trying to just not do it. Um, really trying to actually take breaks. Like I'm very lucky that I can. Like I don't have to use loads of energy to make myself food because I've had family and now my partner. help look after me. But obviously people do that with carers and stuff as well. Um, so really just like anywhere I can saving energy. That's quite a long answer. It's also definitely not all of the stuff that I do. But like the general thing is like, calm down, just do less stuff and
Yeah.
try and make peace with that. I think something that helps me a lot is I also find it quite easy to compare what I'm doing to what I wish I was doing or what my friends were
Yeah.
doing.
Oh my
And that
God.
obviously feels like depressing because I can't
Yeah.
do stuff. So I think something else that I try and think is the opposite way around, which is that like personally the viral infection that I had almost killed me. Like I had very bad
Mm.
sepsis, and I was like, mate, if it was the medieval times or something, probably would have got me. So this probably sounds really morbid, but I'm like, I really try and think about what I can do from starting at zero. Like, but like instead of not being here, here's all the stuff that I can do. I can like look at the trees in the spring. I can like listen to an audiobook in the dark. Like even if it's really small, that probably sounds silly, but I think thinking about it always that way around helps me. And sometimes limiting how much I'm like, I don't know, talking to people who do go out and do loads and loads of stuff is like, that's a lot.
Yeah.
It's useful to try and think carefully about like, is it useful for me to be looking at like Instagram stories of friends who can go abroad when I never can? And it's like, no, that's not helping me. If I talk to them one on one, that's much easier to deal with. Um, So I think one of the biggest things was just like stuff that I know is not great physically or mentally, being like, you actually just don't have to do that. If I can avoid it or do it less or like think carefully about like when I want to do that stuff, that helps me a lot.
Mm. This
Amazing.
this yeah, it's really interesting saying about like because it almost feels cyclical because you're battling your like well personally as well like I find your mental health as well of trying to like do I deserve this, is it like and kind of grappling with the fact that you're not as active as you used to be, that you can't do the things that you used to be. It's not like just comparing yourself to other people, it's like I'm comparing myself to the person that I was, and
Yeah.
that's like quite heartbreaking. You can easily spiral doing stuff like that. But I think just that's the thing with like you were saying about long COVID being a lot more recognized. That yeah, I think I am fortunate in that way because I have like a long COVID group. As soon as I had COVID, it's a bit scary because you think, oh, is it actually long COVID? Is it something else? Because they so quickly glommed onto that. But yeah, it's long COVID. Um, but at the same time, like there are there's a bit more support about it. But I was really hesitant to get like a walking stick because some days I really do need it. Like I get sensory overload and brain fog as well, and I just need it to like steady myself because otherwise I get a
Mm,
bit like, oh. And as well like earplugs I get
yeah.
like I forget what they're called again, brain fog and memory.
Yeah.
I'm really good at speaking and remembering things today, but yeah, they're like these ones that are like in a ear and just kind of like filter noise a little bit, or like yeah, but I still catch myself like being like, why am I tired? I went to a cafe yesterday with loud noises, talking to my friend, having an emotional conversation, having gone out in the cold. you
Yeah.
know, and then I get back and I'm like, why am I tired and I need to go to bed? I'm so rubbish. And it's like,
Yeah.
think about it. Think
Not
about
sorry.
it.
I don't mean to
like,
interrupt, but one of the things
yeah.
that I also actually do because of the I didn't get very much help from doctors really, but one thing they did was like I have a diary where I just write down everything I did. So every time I'm like,
Yeah.
why am I so tired today? And it's like, yeah, well 2 days ago you like watched a film with friends at a distance and you were like typing. And I think it's really hard to remember that like noise, talking, typing, or getting emotionally involved with episodes of Severance is like
Yeah.
that is actually my heart rate is up. Like I think it's maybe if you're not ill, it's I think hard to recognize that like physical tiredness and emotional tiredness and
Mm,
mental tiredness and sensory stuff is actually all the same. That's all making me
yeah.
tired, if that makes sense.
They they described it in the long COVID clinic as like a funnel. So it's like when you have chronic fatigue or any kind of fatigue or chronic illness, like it's like the spooter, I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
It's like it just gets narrower, so you can't process. So everything's going in the top, everything, but it all has to come out the same way. And as you have less like energy, that spooter gets smaller. Like, you know, people who
Mm,
are quite healthy, they can process so much more. But yeah, and I think having a journal is such a good thing. Like even I've since I've had long COVID, I've been writing in it almost every day, and it's literally just like a line and like a habit tracker. That's it, like every day. And that's just been so useful, as you say, to like look over and be like, oh well, I have done things, and at the end of the month, I'll be like, things I did this month. Like last month, I saw friends. That was really good. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know, I went to visit friends and stayed at their house. It was, you know, it took me a week to get over it, but I did it. Like, you know, there are things that I have done, but especially when it comes to like creative work, and because I find it really difficult to visualize now. I basically, my drawing is gone. It's kind of a bit emotional, the fact that I can't draw the way I used to, but I can still write. But yeah, so it's hard to kind of like make creativity kind of work around it, but I'm still managing, as you say, still managing to function, thinking of things that you can do and things that you can still enjoy rather than just like what you can't do. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I think something that I like about writing more now, which is also something that I do, is that you can come back and revise it more easily. You can come back and
Yeah.
revise the drawing. So if you're on a really like can't think clearly day, or I can't like physically hold a pen, I can probably still type,
Yeah.
and like that's still something that I can come back and edit. Whereas I sort of think that there are some stages of drawing where it's like you kind of do need to be focused, and that just requires like not doing other, for me, like have to not do other stuff to be able to be well enough to
Yeah.
like focus in on that.
Mm.
So yeah, I think maybe kind of being able to like pivot to something slightly different creatively is like gutting, but also
Mm. It's
like,
interesting. It's
yeah, it
like
is
more
interesting. Yeah.
opportunities, and you know, it was interesting what you were saying as well about having lots of screens, because I was exactly the same. I had like a huge screen and I had like a massive tablet that I used to draw on in my office next door. Um, and I don't spend any time in my office anymore. Like I have going back to the original question of like things like aids and stuff. I have like a bed desk that's really good and like a
Oh
V
yeah.
pillow that
This
just like varies. Yeah, one of
probably
those.
should have just
Um,
literally mentioned the stuff I have.
I've got a couple. I've got like my bed desk, and at the moment I'm speaking to you because I vary from day to day. Like sometimes I have this like wheelie desk that you're on at the moment that I can like sit in a chair and just wheel it round and use it wherever I feel comfortable sitting. But yeah, just because just looking at a screen like for so long, uh the chair that I was sitting in, the fact that I probably can't do like hours long stints, or do I used to do all-nighters because I was that kind of person. No,
Yeah.
terrible idea.
On just talking about like literal mobility aids type stuff, I would
Mm,
also say that the stuff I have now, like this big wheelie table over a chair and a room that I'm in, is like that's because it's been 9 years. There,
yeah.
I think it's quite intimidating because some of this stuff, like this is expensive. I am like just ill enough to get government benefits, which I'm very lucky. But like, there are so many levels of extremely ill that like don't quite get under their very intense guidelines. But there's definitely a lot of stuff that I did get as well that was much cheaper and easier. Like sitting down in the shower, you don't need a shower chair. Shower chairs are not actually very expensive. Getting just propping up loads of pillows in bed was something that I mostly did for ages. For a while, I had a double bed where I was spent when I was awake, I spent it on one side of the bed, and when I was sleeping or resting, I was on the other side of the bed because someone told me that it's good for your brain to have a different
Yeah.
space so that it feels like the sleep zone. But I think that probably was helpful. Or like you can get bed and what are they called? Like breakfast in bed type little tables, little bamboo ones
Yeah.
for like 20 quid that you can just put on the bed. So I do think there's a lot of like halfway house stuff that you can just be like, actually, I'll just try it and see if
Definitely.
this helps me out. So even though I'm like, I have a hospital type bed that sits me up, there's lots of middle ground as well, including just like, I've also got a little pad. It's like a waterproof pad that's like this big that goes in a backpack that I put on the floor when it's wet. So if I was outside, I could always sit down.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
things that are like very low tech, but like or sitting in a room where I put the chair next to a wall so I can always rest my head on the wall behind me. Like I think there's also ways, maybe it's a bit socially awkward to be like, listen, I've just got to put the chair next to the wall, but or
Yeah.
being like, could you sit down so that I'm not talking to you stood up? So I think there was lots of like small things I could do as well. I just wanted to say, in case there's people like watching who are like,
Yeah.
oh god, I'm not going to be able to get that yet. Like, there's also lots of small useful things too.
And definitely ways you can shop around and find things. I think it's like, yeah, as you say, it's difficult to. It's almost the same as like art materials, right? It's really easy to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna try this and use this, and you just don't know until you've got it whether it's gonna be useful for you.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, there's definitely like the desk that I've got was like maybe like 12 quid, something like that. Like, that wasn't, there are definitely like cheaper ways to do it and ways you can like kind of homebrew it.
yeah,
But I think I was lucky in a way because I'm living at home with my parents. My mum had like knee operations, so she had walking sticks. So I could kind of like dip my toe into getting my
yeah,
own walking stick. But it was definitely like a pride thing as well. I remember people taking pictures of me on holiday and me trying to hide my stick because I was like, am I that person? And I think that's like quite a big thing to kind of get around. If you need it, you need it. Don't
yeah.
like, you
I
know.
definitely had family members who were like, "Don't let your illness define you," and I was like, "That's just." But it was like so well-meaning,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
also so unhelpful because I was like, "It's every moment of every day. What I can do is very restricted by my health, and the more tools I had to help me, the less I was restricted because now I could like go
Yeah.
outside in the wheelchair." I also wanted to say that something I didn't really know is there's quite a lot of places like out in the world that are like have wheelchairs that you can like borrow for the day. So some like art galleries and like uh, national trust houses are actually often have really flat gardens. So they're a really good way of me like being able to see a tree without like trying to take a wheelchair off road. So there's also a lot of like in terms
Yeah.
of like sticks and wheelchair type stuff, there's a lot of things that you can hire but also like sometimes get free because especially big places that with funding like sometimes have to have a bit of an accessible option, so it's not that unusual if you hunt around on websites for places that will just be like, yeah, we have like folding stools you can sit down on in a museum, or we have a wheelchair that you can just take for the day, which I found quite useful.
Mm.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, Bristol is relatively good and awful for sort of like mobility and accessibility. Like some buildings are brilliant and they've really tried and made an effort, and some of them are just awful. Um,
Yeah,
but I remember going to Cabot Circus, which is the big sort of shopping mall in Bristol. I went there with a friend who had sort of like walking problems, and I didn't realize that you could. There was just like on the ground floor where all the disabled parking is. There's like a little station that you can go to, and you can just borrow a mobility scooter, and they'll let you have a mobility scooter. And you do have to have like a disability card to show like I've got this. Or some sort of identification to show that you've been diagnosed with a disability. But yeah, they'll just lend it to you, and then you can use it to go around like the shopping center, which I thought was actually like, oh, that's actually really good that they offer something like that. And it's good to
Mm.
know that there's other places, especially like National Trust and stuff like that, that offer those sort of services as well.
yeah, and there are a
Yeah.
lot that you don't need like any sort of ID because sometimes the idea is like what can you have like a
Yeah.
letter from your doctor, like
Yeah.
I
Oh.
have to use my government like benefits letter as proof. But like if I hadn't qualified for that, I wouldn't have
Yeah,
letter in it, and it doesn't mean that I don't need a wheelchair to get outside. So there's also a lot of places that you also don't need to show
that's good.
Yeah.
I have
I
discovered.
have I recommend as well, like the sunflower stuff if you can get it. There are some
Yeah,
places you can get it for free, but you can. I went online and bought it like the
like the
set.
lanyard.
It was
It's a
like
sunflower
five.
lanyard. Is that what
Yeah,
it is?
but it yeah, I have one, but it's not within reach. Hold on, if I can get. Oh God, but yeah, I recommend it.
Is that for
I
like
always
invisible disabilities?
yeah, there it is.
This is
So
me showing my ignorance.
yeah, it's this. And it's pretty good because on the reverse side it like describes things about it,
Yeah,
so that it is pretty good. I find it more useful if I have to sit on a bus and someone's giving me a dodgy look, because I look very able and sometimes, like, being the people pleaser and the anxious person that I am, I'm trying my best to be like, hi, I'm fine, don't look at me, when really I do need to sit down. I do need this, and like being able to sit on the bus is the difference between me like being able to function the rest of
yeah.
this
Yeah.
day. Like so it is useful. I and you can get it for free, but I couldn't work out where. I think it's like some Tesco's and some Sainsbury's, I think they give them out for free. But
You can get the
yeah.
wee badge if you're in London as well. That's like, please offer me a
Yeah.
seat, and a little card. I also think that sometimes people just need. That's like a psychological thing, apparently, is that if you just tell someone a
Yeah.
reason, it doesn't really matter what the reason is, they're more likely to be like, oh, okay. So if you like have a car and you can just be like, hey, offer me a seat.
Yeah.
I need this, because people will
Yeah.
often just like, if you're brave enough to ask, people often
Yeah.
will help.
I mean,
It's pretty good.
the
Well, oh,
sunflower
sorry.
lanyard is really helpful for us at PrideCAF, because then we obviously know if someone, and they're not just for like physical disabilities as well, they're also for people with neurodiversity as well, which is
Mm,
really, really helpful for us to know if someone may just need like a little bit of extra help, or we might need to put a seat closer down to them without them asking, because that's also a nice thing as well. If you are struggling and you don't have to ask, like it's just there,
Mm,
or it just appears, or if someone
mm,
notices that and goes like, oh, do you need this, which I find is,
yeah.
for me personally, like offering that and also receiving that is a nice thing.
yeah.
Mm.
Sorry, Sarah, I
I think
interrupted you then.
no, no, not at all. Like I think as well, it is. I think it's one of those things that it's useful, but a lot of the time, like you'll go somewhere. Like I was in an airport once, and they had like all the sunflower things. Nobody knows what it is. Like I was standing in a queue waiting to get on a plane. This was me being like, I can do this. This is fine. I really couldn't do this. And like there was no seats. There was nothing. Nobody asked anything about the lanyard. I was there with a stick, being like, great, cool. It's not something you can rely on, but it is
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
that can help. Um,
I
and
also
also,
think,
it just, sorry, yeah,
no,
it
I
also,
used to work in events, and I think that sometimes staff should know. But obviously,
yeah,
if there's no staff around at the airport, then there's not
you
a
can't,
problem.
you can't rely on it.
Yeah.
But and also it does stop. I'm trying to think of a nice word. Horrible people. Like if I have to use a toilet, like for example, like the cafe, there was, if there's a disabled toilet that I don't have to go up and downstairs to, like if I use this and I'm wearing a lanyard, people don't question you. Like because there are, as much as you hate to think about it, there are horrible people who aren't gonna be give you space. But yes, it is useful for that. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess on that subject, is there anything you wish people knew more about? I mean, I think in a way you've already spoken quite a bit about it, like especially with people who are sort of struggling at the moment with like coming to terms with their disability, or trying to find ways to sort of manage their pain or their energy levels. So talking about like, there are cheaper options to things. Don't worry too much if these things look really expensive, but you need it now. There are alternatives. Um, and also like if there's anything else, like people who don't struggle from these disabilities, like is there something that you wish they knew more about, besides from obviously like the sunflower lanyards and so on and so forth? Is there anything? you can think of?
I feel like one of the biggest things that I think people who don't know disabled people don't know is how variable it can be. Like maybe you could do that thing one day, but you won't be able to another day. I also think that if you just have friends or family who are disabled, you can just, if you're like, oh God, I don't really know what to do, you can just ask, just be like, what would make this easier for you? We want you to come to this party, but like, what would make that doable? Like, what would help? Because I think it's going to be really different depending on like the person and their health problems, and it's kind of fine if you don't really know what to do, like magically if you don't know what to do, like they didn't either before they were ill. So I sort of think that asking, because it's always going to be different, especially rather than maybe being like, well, my cousin's dog's older owner used to have ME and they always did this, so it's like it's fine, you can just ask. I think it's probably what I would say, just
And
because it's
also
different.
trying to like solve your problem as well. Like, oh yeah, my sister's dog's cousin had ME, but also they used to take this supplement and
Right,
this
and
would
they
solve your
tried yoga
problem.
and they're actually fine now. So
Yeah.
yeah, even that, just being like, oh, I read something about your illness. Do you want to hear about it? Is like that's a useful,
Yeah.
like that's helpful, I think, because you
It's
don't know
really,
if that person has heard it already 20 times that day and they can't access it or whatever it is.
yeah, it's coming from a different angle, isn't it? It's like I've researched this because I care about you and I wanted to know more. And this could help you, but I'm not gonna tell you about it unless you need it, rather than I can solve your problem. I tried this and it was great. Let's stop talking about it now. Like, it's that kind of attitude that can get just another one I had was oh, when you're better we can do this. And I was like, that just made me spiral because I was like,
Yeah,
when is that going to be? I can't. I think one thing is that that's really difficult is that a lot of people don't seem to realize is planning. It's really hard to plan anything. Like, I don't know day to day whether I'm going to be, I don't think I'm ever at 100%. I'm usually at my best days, which are few and far between, like 70, 80. And that is like for small periods of time. Most of the time I'm on about 50, 40 energy levels. And it's like, I some days I do everything right and I'm still at 40, 30, like, in bed, like nothing, and it's so difficult to say, like, and then as you say, people will see you like they'll see you do something and be like, oh, so you can do things then, here you go. Like,
yeah.
you'll be like this all the time. Okay, cool.
I I
But
do a lot of
yeah,
like provisionally saying calls, be like, let's check in on Thursday at this
yeah,
time to see if we can do it,
mm,
and if I'm well enough, then I can do it, kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's
Um,
definitely something I'm trying to get used to. Yeah, sorry.
I, I was just gonna say that I think that people are bad at dealing with chronic illness as an idea. People really like the
Yeah,
idea that you're sick and like, but you'll get better soon. Like socially, I think people are really trained into like finding the silver lining, and it's like there isn't always one, so you just don't need to do it.
mm,
Um, and I think honestly, a reason that I kind of like historical fiction sometimes, which is what the book I just did is, that's what I'm doing a bit at the moment, is that you do get people hundreds of years ago in books who just like get sick and they just don't get better. Right? Like, I think
mm,
I honestly see more disabled people who are just like, I've unknown illness, or I like see coughing a little bit and now I'm like trapped in bed, is something that I don't really see in a lot of modern media, but I do kind of see
yeah,
in like kind of Regency stuff. So I find that like sort of weirdly kind of validating, because I'm like, I know that there are lots of people who have this around and it feels like it just doesn't make it into media, whereas it's like quite a fact of life in a lot of old stuff. I think people now like the idea
yeah,
that, well, doctors can cure anything, the idea that there isn't a treatment for an illness or that you're not going to be bouncing back at some point, is, I think, people aren't like emotionally prepared, they just don't know how to like respond to that really. So I think it's also, apart from having to watch more chill stuff anyway, because I can't always look at intense pictures or stories, I think it probably has changed a bit of like the kind of stories that I'm interested in, both for writing and reading, watching, whatever it is.
I think along that sort of same subject as well, like I think a lot of people are quite sort of misguided by media, where you have like these doctor shows that kind of someone's got a mystery illness, we're gonna fix it, and like we're gonna do everything to make them better, when in real life that's not the
I've
case.
watched
The
that.
doctor will just say, oh,
Yeah,
take some time off work, you know, take some more vitamin D, you'll be fine, sort of
Yeah,
thing, when
yeah.
literally that's like not the help that you need.
yeah. Do you ever have the doctors being like, "Great news, your tests are negative," and it's like,
Yeah,
I'm still in.
yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if the test was negative. Like, I
I
can't
had
move.
that the other
So
day. I was like, oh, because
yeah,
in a way, I'd love for the test to be like, oh no, you've got this, because then it's like amazing. I can
yeah,
do something about that.
yeah.
It's just, I sneeze all the time. Is there an explanation? No, no.
I
It's
think
just non-allergic rhinitis, which means you sneeze.
yeah.
Like, cool.
I think even healthy
Hmm.
people, it's a bit of a fantasy to be like, there's a pill. Everything that's wrong with you, it turns out you've been struggling with rare disease that we know about
Yeah.
for all your life, and now you'll just take a pill and you'll be better. It's like you don't have to be disabled for that to be like an attractive idea, I
Yeah.
think.
One of my friends who's also dealt with like chronic illness, he said everyone is in their 20s until the accident or the disease.
Yeah.
Which I think is definitely a mood. But yeah, it's I think the thing is that like even like you're saying about other people wanting it to be fixed, like I really just want it to be fixed, so I
Yeah, yeah,
completely
yeah.
understand. I understand that thought process. But yeah, it is, yeah, it's but I think people who haven't had the accident or the disease find it very difficult to like process that there isn't an easy answer. There isn't a way to just fix it, but you know, you are doing the best you can. Everyone's doing the best they can.
Yeah.
You know, like yeah.
I think talking about like the disease, that's another big thing, is that being not ill is a temporary state, and I think people see it as the like
Yeah,
normal, and it's like
yeah,
if you don't get hit by a bus, like being non-disabled is the temporary thing that's gonna give way like the older you get, whoever it is. Um,
yeah,
yeah, I just mean it's interesting how much is also like really big society-wide stuff. Even when like there was all that sort of rhetoric where it was like, oh, like Boris Johnson like fighting like in a battle against COVID when he got sick. There's so much stuff about the idea that you're
yeah.
like battling against illness, when like I think especially for some post-viral stuff, the idea of like fighting against it is like not very helpful to me, because
Yeah.
when the thing that I need is to be more restful. But I think there's so much like society-wide ideas that you have to almost spend some time unlearning to be able to
Yeah.
sort of do the best you can with what you have.
It's definitely like an individuality, like capitalist nightmare mindset, isn't it?
Right,
That
just pull
everybody
yourself
is
up by
like,
your bootstraps out of your
yeah,
debilitating physical
Mm.
illness.
and
Just,
trying to unlearn that. I think even for people who aren't in any way like don't have chronic illness or aren't disabled or you know, I think everyone can do better at being kind to themselves, because that's one thing that you really can control is how, you know, or you can try to like, you know, work on is just finding ways to make things easier for yourself and to just try and have like a kinder internal dialogue, because that's just like, for me at least, it's kind of been half the battle and I'm still trying to get there. Like it has been 4 years, like, but I'm still like, when we were talking, when you were messaging about this, I was like, I don't have my shit together. I don't know how useful I'm gonna be. I don't you know. So but I think that is definitely something that I've learned is just, you know, and I don't do it all the time. Like I'm still terrible at it, but it is helpful to try and have those um like processes in place to be like, that's not very kind, is it? Like maybe, you know, just because you're tired, that's not a personal failing. You being ill is not a personal failing. This is something that is outside of your control. There are things that you can do to help yourself. But I don't know if that makes any sense again. But
No,
yeah.
yeah, because I guess
Mm,
you're also having to deal with that mental health side of everything as well. You're having to deal with the fact
mm,
of possibly feeling like, oh, I'm failing this, or I used to be able to do this, why can't I do it anymore? And that sort of frustration
yeah.
that can lead to like anxiety and depression. Um, and even just having depression or social anxiety or general anxiety as, you know, sort of like that, something that stops you from accessing things that you need to, you know, is also like a massive thing, and can also be, even in this day and age where we talk about mental health and well-being quite a lot, is still massively sort of like looked down upon, if that's the
Yeah.
right word.
Mm,
I had I was struggling at work just over a year ago, and I took sort of 3 weeks off because I was like, I need this, like it's just hitting my mental health really badly. And I won't say the family member who said it because I don't want to put them on the spot for it. But they basically just kind of went, oh, and they were talking about two other people who were unemployed at the time, and they just kind of went, oh, well, that's three people I know who are not working at the moment. And that was like not the mentality that I like. You wouldn't say that if I'd broken my leg or something and then I
Yeah.
couldn't go into work, but because it was a mental health thing, it's still not seen the same way. um
mm,
which I think is really bad, because I think a good majority of mental health stuff probably does come from like the stress of the workplace and your productivity and, you know, financial issues
yeah.
and all sorts of stuff that's sort of happening in the world. Like that does affect your mental health, and just having that break and allowing yourself to have that break is really important. um but the fact that that's still sort of looked down upon as like making yourself feel, you know, sort of weak and a failure because you can't keep your head above everything, um, I think is something that everyone, like you said, Sarah, just has to be more kinder to themselves about. Like you
Mm,
can't control how other people are going to see you, but you can try and control how you're going to feel about yourself.
mm,
And you know that like what you're doing now is actually the best thing for you, and is the best thing for your
mm,
mental health, so that you can then carry on and be productive. And I can, as sort of like when my energy levels have been really bad, I can feel like a bit of a failure if I can't sort of walk as far as I want to do, or sort of go out one day and then I can't go out the next day. Like tomorrow, because this is going on for 11 hours, I'm probably just going to be out dead. I'm probably just going to spend all day in bed tomorrow. Um,
mm,
but like, it's definitely taken me a while to be kinder to myself and to allow myself to do that and not feel bad that I'm now not going to be able to
mm.
go on a jog tomorrow or something. So,
Yeah.
I think I also
Yeah.
basically always feel awful physically and mentally when I can't do stuff. So
mm,
if, and even though all I'm doing is like making a choice, like, well, I know I'm going to shower, or I know I'm going to talk or do this thing, so I know I'm going to feel worse tomorrow or the day after or whatever. Um, it still feels physically and emotionally awful to like not be able to do anything. And I
Mm,
think that like probably time as well, but just when I'm feeling bad, instead of being like, why are, is it because I don't do enough? Is it because I like, why do I feel so bad? I almost like try to be like, it's not worth thinking about. I just am going to feel bad when I can't do anything. Let's see, like, can you listen to music? Like, is there something you can do that is not thinking like, oh, why can't I do this stuff today? So I don't know. I think that that's something I kind of heard talking about like chronic pain as well, is that like sometimes it's just helpful to not think about. It's not always helpful to be like focusing in thinking about the
yeah.
stuff that I can't do. So trying to recognize that like, oh, I know that I am feeling bad because I can't sit up today. What could you do? Like if I'm going to be lying in bed, like what's the least painful way of this being like an okay experience? Or if it's like asking
Mm,
for a cup of tea or like watching something if I can or whatever. I don't know.
mm. That's a really good way of thinking about it. I got quite upset, I think, yesterday or the day before because I was trying to draw and it just wasn't. I was getting exhausted and I was like, I need to like update my Instagram. I need to start like getting my work together to start applying for conventions and do it. And it's just like, and again, like I was spiraling, being like, why can't I do this? But I think to think like that is a lot more healthy rather than just, yeah, digging yourself a hole, isn't it?
I mean,
Really?
that's the ideal way of thinking.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I'm always like, actually, I'm thinking through this really logically, and now I'm fine with it. But that's what I try and keep in my mind.
Sometimes you do just have to lie down going, ah!
I
You know, you
genuinely,
just have to
right? Like,
yell
I
in the
sort of
car.
think that like accepting where you're at, even if it's like, oh, I'm so miserable, I can't do anything, is like, okay, it's fine to be miserable because you can't do things. That makes
Yeah.
sense. I don't know.
Can you do something nice for yourself? Like, okay, you are feeling miserable. This is the way that it is. Put something nice on. What can you do that is nice for yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got 10 minutes left. I was wondering if we could have a little chat about sort of themes of disability in creative work. If there's anything that you feel like has been like a particularly good like portrayal of sort of disabilities, or sort of ME or long COVID. I know that's a very opened question, so it can be anything to make it even more open.
Not
Or any
honestly,
bad ones.
like nothing springs to mind. I really think,
Yeah.
especially when the bigger something is, like a really big film, can
Yeah.
I think of like great portrayals of disability in it? Not really. I definitely think there were like books, because those tend to be more like individual person
Mm.
talking about their
Yeah.
experience. Um, I don't know. Lizzie Huxley Jones has wrote a couple of Christmas books where there are disabled characters in it, and I remember just being like, that's nice. They just can't do things sometimes, and I was like, yeah, nice. That's the best
Yeah.
example I can think of, apart from
Yeah.
people, romantic poets dying in period dramas, which are very
Yeah.
relatable to me. Um,
I think a lot of portrayals, like you said, Harry, are just like, oh, it tends to be more about like diversity and visibility, which is obviously important. But at the same time, a lot of it comes from this like capitalist individualist standpoint of, yes, I'm in a wheelchair, but I can still do everything you can do, and I am a strong, independent woman who is in a wheelchair. And that's just like great. That is a useful thing, but there are less depictions of people who actually have a disability or have any kind of chronic illness that they're dealing with, um, and can't do things. You know,
yeah, I,
yeah.
I I don't know how much I'm supposed to be talking about this, but I am at the moment like working on the first book that I have done where like a main character has like the same sort of illness as me, and is like really significantly limited um, in what they can do. But it took me a really long time to like kind of get there. I think because I'm so ill all the time, I didn't want the one thing that I'm doing, which is being able to work on books sometimes, to also be thinking about someone who's really ill all the time. So
Mm.
it's sort of a bit of a challenge, and definitely not something that I could do in the first few years of being ill. But I also get people who read my other stuff who are like, "Oh, is this about being disabled?" I did the webcomic that I did between 2016 and 2023. One of the main characters is like magic, and then like dramatically changes what he's able to do, like goes through stuff that means like suddenly he just like can't do the magic stuff anymore, and is like really like limited in that way. And I was like, or I wrote a
Mm.
vampire book where all of the vampires have like died and had a completely, they've now got like new sort of lives which don't really resemble the stuff they could do before. They can't do all the stuff they could before. And I was like, so every time a reader is like, is this about disability? I'm like, I guess actually, yeah. So
Yeah.
I sort of think, even if I'm not writing about it directly, which I sort of have my own reasons for wanting to or not wanting to do in terms of like what
Mm.
works for me on a what I'm working on day-to-day basis, it's often something that is sort of there. So like you said, the broader theme of like being kinder to yourself about your limitations, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what those are, like mentally or physically, but to do with disability or not as well, to be honest. Um, thinking about quite a lot and like themes of in books, whether I'm writing or reading them.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I think there was someone. Was it the Sarah J. Maas? I think I've got them somewhere. Was it Six of Crows and all that? I know there's a character in that like dramatically their magic changes. Um, yeah, that had lots of like disability coded kind of things. But yeah, but it is difficult to think of like, yeah, even on on just the visibility side of someone in a wheelchair or someone with a stick, it is hard to find, like a main character, especially in like, mass market fiction, mass market, like, it is hard. But
There's probably
yeah.
loads of stuff. I feel like I should have come prepared with a list, and I'm just
Yeah.
not at all.
Yeah, especially in indie and like biographical comics, and as you say, like when people are writing fiction, it is a lot easier to find someone who's writing something that's a bit more personal.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
obviously, I would say this, but I'm basically always going to be like, indie comics, that's what you're looking for. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
probably there's someone in indie comics who's
yeah,
doing it. So,
I
yeah.
mean, the majority of the stuff that I know about you, Harry, is from so pretty much for a good few years now, you've done the hourly comic on like the 1st of
yeah,
February,
Yeah.
and knowing sort of like what you go through on a day-to-day basis, like I know from that, which I think is like a wonderful thing for people to be able to see and read through.
that's really nice to hear. I mean, that was last
Mm.
week this
Yeah.
year, but I've been doing it for years now. And it's an experience that, again, it can be depressing. Like, some years I was drawing myself having dropped a packet of paracetamol and I was too ill to pick it up. And I just like
Oh,
really wanted to take a paracetamol and I just couldn't move at all. And so
God.
obviously drawing that is like kind
Mm.
of is depressing.
Mm.
And having and hearing from lots of people who are in similar situations is can be quite hard. Um, and also, I tend to be doing it on a day that I'm well, and I have to rest before so that I'm well enough to draw the hourly comics. So I'm always like, this is over representing what I can do. And then another part of me is like,
Mm.
or maybe this is making a fuss, and you're fine. um, I mean, I think it's just because so many people
The
see those
brain.
that I tend to be like, is this right? Am I like sort of? I think it's difficult to get across my whole life experience, right? When it's just a short little
Mm.
thing. Um, but even though it's quite hard to do, I mean, it's part of why I wanted to do a big book that has a main character who has a similar disability. Is um, it feels like really nice to be honest about it. It does feel like if I do occasional like work calls with my agent or editors, and it feels like in those it's not helpful to talk about my health unless it's relevant to the work, right? Um, not that I feel like I can't, but I'm just like I don't have enough energy to get into it really. So it feels a little bit sometimes like I'm not being totally honest. Because if I was being totally honest, I'd just be like, I'm really ill today, guys, every day.
Mm.
So I really like doing those hourly comics, and I do hear a lot from people, and I've definitely had like suggestions of people being like, "Have you tried this cushion? This cushion's on sale. It'll be good for you sitting on the sofa." And I was like, "Oh," and it definitely was. I think that's a really nice way to like connect and talk about those really small things, which is just like I listen to podcasts because I realized that video is too much for me. Like the little small adaptations I don't really think about. Um, so I think just like the internet is for me, although social media is a bit grim a lot of the time. I think kind of it's really nice to just see people in the same boat because actually, like day to day, I am not seeing people as ill as I am because they're at home, being ill in their rooms as
Mm.
well. I think it's reassuring to me to see again that other people are giving themselves that leeway, and I'm allowed to as well.
Cool. We've got like about a minute left. I was wondering if I
Sorry.
could just read out a couple of the questions that we did get in the chat. Most of them actually come from Chris. So one of the questions he did ask was to you, Sarah. You were talking about some inner ear things that you wear
Mm.
to sort of reduce sound. Are they the loop ones?
I tried Loop. I didn't really get on with them. I use Flare,
Right.
which people, you got to use what works for you. But yeah, and it's literally just like it's, they are like inner ear and just kind of like like a tube. that you put in. Some people
Right.
say it's like doesn't do much, and I can't say that it like fixes everything. But for me, I found that like it does make things just a little bit more bearable. I kind of have those on when I go out and I'm chatting to someone, and I put my loops in when I'm trying to work because they block out more sound. But yeah, I think they're called Flare. But yeah.
Cool. And the last one was, so Chris has asked for honest question, would a grabber, so like one of those ones where it's sort of like you have like the mechanism at the top and it sort of can grab things on a pole, those sort of things, would a grabber be useful for people who have trouble picking up things? Or
Yes.
yeah.
I mean, I think so. I mean, in
Yeah.
terms, if it was about like when I drop the paracetamol, like, yeah. But I think I mostly have stuff on tables that are really close to me because it's more about
Yeah.
general mobility. But I do know that there are people who use those when they have problems with like bending over, if they're like
Mm,
going able to do more stuff around the house, basically. But
mm,
Cool.
yeah.
Well, I want to say a big thank you for both of you for coming on today. Like, I really, really appreciate it. Um, links to your socials and everything we'll put in the description. This will also go out as its own individual video on YouTube, so people don't have to scroll through the whole 12-hour live stream. But thank you to everyone also who joined us today, and if you asked any questions, I'm sorry I missed them. But yeah, just like a really big thank you again to you, Harry, and to you, Sarah, for joining us and being so open about your lives. And yeah, just thank you so much.
it was really nice
Oh,
to
thank
talk.
you.
Nice to see both of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, it
Um,
was lovely chatting.